Record. All right, welcome to First Team Wednesday trainings, everyone. Thank you for being part of today. We got Elizabeth Meyers going deeper into the RPA, the best practices, what we should know, and just diving deeper into it. So Elizabeth, we really appreciate you, and you're on.
Oh, well, thank you, Greg. Good morning, everybody. I was talking to Greg about this kind of crazy weather outside. Who knew it was supposed to rain on the actual official first day of summer? So happy summer, everyone. I am going to share my screen. I have a pretend RPA all ready for us. So let me get to this. Let me find. Okay, share my screen. Let's see. All right, share. Give me just a second. We're going to pull it up. You probably can see my screen now. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good. Okay. I'm going to collapse everything here. Okay. Have it all ready. And of course, it closed now that I'm on with you guys. All right. Well, gosh, we have had this RPA now for about 6 months. You know, as you know, CAR launched a new RPA in December of 2021. So 6 months into it, we are now having a lot of opportunity either to write an offer or to receive these offers. So at one point, I'm going to ask you guys if there's anything
live versus yesterday
that you guys want me to cover. But since we last talked, and I think maybe Greg can help me remember when I visited with you last, I think it was maybe February, in a different market, right? And so there's a couple of things now on the RPA that we might want to adjust considering things aren't flying off the shelf. We have a little bit more inventory. And golly, really, which is a catalyst to some of the concern out there, are these changes of interest rates, right? So we're going to talk a little bit, now that the market shifted, we're going to emphasize how do I write an offer in this market with the interest rates being dynamic, which affects affordability. And golly, is there any way that I can ask for the seller to carry some costs, things like that? All right, so does that sound good with everybody? All right, so Greg, I can't see anybody. I'm just gonna move forward, okay? Greg, let me know if I need to stop or somebody has a question. Does that work?
Yep, I'll monitor chat and the microphones.
Excellent, okay, good, all right. All right, so you can see my screen. I have mocked up, because I wanted to save it, an RPA. This looks familiar to you. Just a heads up, you know, when you pull up any kind of a form and you're wondering, hey, when was the last time this form was revised? You'll see a date here. So CAR form RPA 1221, that's letting me know I have the right version. And this was updated in December. Remember, CAR forms opportunity to be changed or modified twice a year, in June and in December. And this go around in December of 2021, they redid the RPA. They just didn't modify language. They, rewrote it for us. And I think it's very helpful because unlike the old RPA, which by the way, you can't even access anymore on zip forms. The only way you'd be able to access it is if you had saved it in
okay, I have to get my earbuds now.
Okay, so here we go, RPA. It's going to look very familiar, part 1 and part 2. It's my offer, put Mr. Buyer, date prepared, may not be the same day that we're signing, no problem. Information about the property, don't forget the county, and of course, don't forget the APN number. None of this is new to you guys. You have the 2 different brokerage. That looks very familiar to you guys. One thing I want to point out here on agency, in the event that there are 2 different brokers who are either writing the offer or 2 different brokers who have the listing, there's actually an ability here under C, agency C, more than one broker representing the seller or the buyer. And then as soon as I click one of these areas, automatically an auto population of the additional broker acknowledgement form will be brought into my transaction through zip forms. So easy. We're seeing some of this. I have a couple of these in my office right now. So how beautiful that it just gives me an opportunity to handle that right in the RPA. Okay, so as you know, golly, they've done a beautiful job creating a grid. And I know people go, what the heck? Why are there 16 pages to this RPA? And what's nice about it is that everything is up front in the first 3 pages, unlike the previous RPA where you'd have to, oh, is this on page 3? Is this on page 4? Some of the information, not that it was hidden, but the changes to the terms were actually not easy to see because you'd have to go look for it. And it was sometimes easy to miss some of those terms, which of course changes the contract. So the good news is, even though it's 16 pages, all the information, the pertinent information, are going to be on the first 3 pages. The RPA is definitions and explanations. So again, you probably know this, just want to briefly go over this with you. When I look at my grid, it's really easy for our eyes to go here under terms and conditions, because as agents, this is where we're going to fill out a lot of information. This is a live RPA that I have opened up through zip forms. So as you know, every time you see a yellow highlighted area, it's going to be an opportunity for me to add information or edit or amend the contract. So, but just as, and you know this, but just as a little reminder, let's go for the first line, A, and then it says paragraph number, terms and title, terms and conditions, and additional information. If I didn't understand what they're asking for here, and it says A, paragraph 5, what it's telling me, or what it's telling any agent or the person completing this, if I needed an explanation on what this is asking me, I can go to A, paragraph number 5. So then I scroll past my grid.
Gosh,
Did I go too far?
what are we going through? No.
Thanks, Greg. 5A, so I can go over here to 5. Scroll down to 5. And then it talks about purchase price. So if you want, so this is the grid. If you need a definition on what it's asking, that's when you're going to go to the definition part of the RPA. Okay, so let's go back. Purchase price. All right, in my pretend offer, I have a $1 million purchase price. That's lovely, right? Medium price in Orange County. And again, if it's all cash, I can click all cash. And as soon as I clicked all cash, I don't know if you caught that, I'm going to notice all the highlighted areas here. I click all cash, and those highlighted areas disappear, because with all cash, it becomes, I don't need to complete the loan information. I don't need to talk about appraisals because it's all cash. So I'm going to unclick that, and you're going to you'll be able to see the changes. So all cash, I just put 30 days in here. Expiration of the offer, this is norm 30 days after after the buyer signs. But of course you can amend that. Initial deposit, increased deposit. Okay, let's go down to loan amounts, because this is really topical for what we're living today. So loan amounts. In the past, of course, this was always on page 1 of the RPA. I have seen RPAs that have the loan amounts completed, including points and interest rate caps. And then I've seen RPAs that leave it blank. So if I am representing the buyer and I write an offer, it's going to be important that I represent my client, and my client is the buyer. So when it comes to loan amounts, I'm buying a property, hypothetically, for $1 million. His first loan amount is going to be $800,000. Let's say he has 20% down. All right. And so I have one extra zero there. $800,000. All right. Which means I have about 20% down, right? All right, $800,000. So which is 80% of the purchase price. It auto-populated. Now, I have yet to complete fixed rate or adjustable rate not to exceed. Unlike when we talked back in January, February, this is really going to be important because I represent the buyer and I want to protect the buyer. So yes, right now, how I have this RPA completed is that he's going to be able to get a loan for $800,000 regardless of the interest rate. but I want to protect him. So I will have talked to his lender and I'm gonna say, listen, lender, who of course works in California and is very familiar with our CAR farm. I want to protect the buyer. He is qualified for $800,000. But at one point, can he not exceed that rate? And then the lender is going to say, you know what, fixed rate. He's going to do fixed rate, and we're not to exceed 6.5%, and maybe 1 point. So now I've capped it, which is going to be super important in this market, because if I left that blank, here's the tricky part. This is theoretical, of course. If I left that blank, I sent an offer over to Greg. Greg looks at my offer and says, this is beautiful. Elizabeth, where's the lender letter? I send over the lender letter, and the lender letter says, these clients are approved except for conditions of a title and an appraisal. Greg is going to look at this and say, oh my goodness, they're so good to go. They're golden. We're going to go with this offer. We're going to go with this buyer. I know the agent. She's easy to work with. This is going to be just a cakewalk. Well, I don't amend any of my contingency periods. And sure enough, on the 17th day, I call Greg and say, hey, Greg, I have some bad news. I'm canceling. We're going to cancel this escrow. Greg says, why? I said, well, we couldn't get a loan. And Greg says, what do you mean you couldn't get a loan? I said, well, we couldn't get a loan. You know, things have changed and interest rates have gone up. We can't get a loan. And Greg's going to say to me, wait a minute, Elizabeth, you said that you're going to be able to get a loan, and you never capped that loan, Elizabeth. So theoretically, does Elizabeth actually have the right to have do those buyers really have the ability to cancel? Sure. But could Greg give me a hard time in regarding to the return of the EMD? Very possible. So let's be really, really clear. In this market, with the dynamic interest rates changing and fluctuating, which affects affordability, my representation is to the buyer. So I want to help support them and protect them. So I'm going to say that I don't want the interest rates to exceed 5.7 or 6.5 with one point. Now, I'm not a lender. I'm not the money person. I'm the realtor. I'm representing them in the transaction. So I'm actually going to defer this information to the lender so they can help me figure out which numbers I need to plug in there, because they're the money people. They're crunching all the information. Sound good? All right.
Yeah.
So again, as you know, in the event, if it was an FHA loan or a VA loan, and you can see the scrolling, as soon as I clicked on FHA loan, the bundle for the FHA, see, I'm going to redo it again so you can kind of see it.
Is there a way, Elizabeth, a couple asked if you can enlarge the screen in regards to the
How's
contract?
that?
There you go.
So
That
sorry,
rocks.
guys.
Awesome.
Sorry. No problem. I gotta turn the air on. Hold on. Sarah, do you want to turn the air on? Okay. Sorry, guys. Grandma has her glasses and we're turning on the air. Okay. So just a little reminder, in the event if it's an FHA or a VA, that advisory will be automatically added as soon as I click on this button. So remember in the old days, I don't know, 6 months ago, we were writing offers and we were just, instead of really having the ability to negotiate with the seller, we were just competing with other buyers. I mean, that was the market we were in. It was a competition, not a negotiation. And in competing, you wanted to be the prettiest offer, the offer that seemed the most amiable to whatever the seller needed, because you just needed to win. Well, during that time, we found ourselves in predicaments where we were going to our buyers saying, hey, you know, in order to be the prettiest girl at the dance, let's talk about modifying some of your contingency periods and some of these safety nets that you have in order to really be thank you, Greg, to be the best, to be the best offer. So we found ourselves actually lifting appraisal contingencies, investigation timeframes or modifying timeframes, lifting appraisals. So when we do that, that was something that we talked about with our buyer. Our buyer understood. As a reminder, if you have an FHA or a VA loan, and you probably are not going to do this in this market, and you still want it to be a good competitor, and you're thinking, you know what, it's okay, we're going to lift our appraisals for the FHA or the VA. Remember, you can write that, but as soon as I click this FHA or VA, which is indicating what kind of loan I have, that advisory pops up, the advisory gets signed and fully executed. That advisory is basically saying, it doesn't matter what Elizabeth wrote in the offer, that she is removing the appraisal contingency. The advisory for the FHA or the VA says it's still in. So heads up on that. So if you are a listing agent, you get an FHA offer and that agent has said, hey, you know what, don't worry about the appraisal. We've removed the appraisal contingency, but they've also slipped in it. FHA VA advisory, it's still in there. Your contingency is still alive. All right. Let's go down to page 1 here. Something that is different. Occupancy type, primary. So it's going to default to primary, or is this a secondary house, or is it an investment house? Investment property. So the difference between a secondary or an investment property is, just think of Palm Springs. You know, I live here in Tustin, and I would like a secondary home on Palm Springs that I can go to on the weekends, every other weekend. And we play golf and tennis, and that's a second home to us. Or I'm going to have a second home in Arrowhead. That's different than me picking up property and renting that out as an investment. So you have an option, defaults to primary, secondary, or investment. It's kind of an easy way. Did I miss anything? Oh, one thing that I noted, remember, going back to the loans. Philosophically, during a time of inflation, you will see investors investing not in the stock market, they're buying, and they're buying hard assets, real estate. So we may see more investors as our buyers. Investors like to come in and say, I'm all cash, I'm all cash, I'm all cash. It's just a hard money loan, but it's all cash. You guys know this. Hard money loan is cash. Okay, so let me back up here. Hard money loan. So yes, is it quick? And is it really expensive? And can they do it in a short amount of time? Yes, yes, and yes. But it's called a hard money loan because it's actually a loan. So I know they want to sell it as cash, but it's a loan. So when you are talking to your sellers as a listing agent and you say, oh, we have this offer, it's like cash, but understand, you can't close a hard money loan like sometimes investors might promise within a couple days, because there's lots of work that title and escrow has to do. There are loan docs, and there things have to be signed and sent back. So be very aware that a hard money loan, like in the title, is actually a loan. Okay, let's see. Let's go to page 2. So this is some great new language on the top of page 2. And this is about, where am I? Okay, seller credit. Okay, again, different market than we were in the last time we talked. Golly, those rates are higher, which of course affects, and you guys are talking about this in your offices, affordability. Your little buyers are out there and you've been showing them property. They've gotten beat up for the last, 4 or 5 months when rates were at 3.5 and 4.5 and 5, and now they're at 6. So what they could afford now looks a little different than what they could afford 6 months ago, right? So they just feel really, really beat up. And but that's okay. They can do it. They can do it. We've adjusted. We've pivoted. We can do it. But gosh, wouldn't it be nice if I could get the seller to pay for some credits, or the seller to pay for some of my closing costs? So how funny, 6 months later, look at how we have now moved, the pendulum has swung. We would have never talked about seller credits 6 months ago. In the last 2 years, we didn't talk about adjustable rates. We didn't talk about seller credits, because we were just talking about how in the heck can I write an offer so I can beat everybody else out. We talked about how to be competitive. We didn't talk about how to negotiate. How do I be competitive? How am I writing escalation clauses? Gosh, 6 months later, are we even talking about that anymore? Now that we know how to do it, it's out the window. not totally out the window, but so, okay. So in this market where my buyer has gotten beat up, they got beat out of other offers. Now they've gotten beat up with these interest rates. Wouldn't it be great if I could say to the seller, hey, I'm going to write you a beautiful offer, but I'm also going to ask you to credit my buyer some money so that they have to bring less cash in to close. So seller credit, if any, to the buyer. Beautiful. This is a new language. It's right there. And this is a beautiful example of this grid working for us, it being upfront. In the old offer, sometimes agents would put this under finance where it should have been. Sometimes they actually hid it under other terms. Very easy to miss. It's not going to be missed now. It's right here. So if I'm writing an offer to Greg and the list price is $1 million, I'm going to offer $1 million, but I'm going to ask for credit. Reminder, I'm not the lender. I'm not the loan person. I'm not the number person. My talents lay in a different lane. So when I'm writing this offer, I'm going to be very communicative with my lender to say, okay, so what if I write a full price offer and ask for some credits? How much could I ask for? How much money is actually there in fees that we can ask the seller to cover? And, you know, asking the seller to cover $20,000 in credit sounds great, but check with your lender to make sure there's $20,000 worth of fees. That's a high amount of fees. We have weekly meetings here in my office in Tustin. And of course, every Thursday, when the first person who speaks is our in-house lender, Bob. And question is, what are the rates today, Bob? And hey, Bob, what if I get some credits to pay down the loan? Meaning you can take some money instead of 6, can I get it down to 6 and a 2, 3, 4, you know, whatever. And from my conversations we've had in my office, buying down is expensive, doesn't really get you very far. So if you're asking for seller credits, the seller credits most likely will be to cover closing costs. Check with the lender before you write this down because the lender is the money cruncher. Okay. Again, so nice. Look at this. This is a default. This is a big change from the other contract. Verification of all cash, verification of down payment, verification of loan of payment. It is written that it is assumed to be attached to the offer. That's different than the old offer where it said you have to check if attached or if you're going to send it within, you know, the couple of days that you had promised to send it in. So this is nice. It's an assumed attached unless you edit it here. Final condition of the property, which is your walkthrough, 5 days, right there. Item J, 5 days prior to COE, or you can modify that. Okay, assignment. This is right here, K, not even halfway through the contract. What the heck is an assignment? So an assignment is when you are bringing in possibly another buyer. We see this sometimes when, great example, first-time buyer, they're buying a house, you've been working with them, finally find them a house, and they're so excited, and they've been waiting and waiting. They feel very beat up, first-time buyer. And as we know, first-time buyers have to be really coddled, sold on this process multiple times, lots of conversation. If they're younger, lots of texting. That's how they like to communicate. You know, they'll text you a question that actually is a 15-minute conversation. So, you know, you've navigated all this and 17th day is coming along and you talk to your lender. Okay, lender, you know, 17th day, I promised to look at my contingencies. Are we good to go? And your lender goes, yeah, your buyer just went and bought a car. Your buyer just went and bought a refrigerator, washer and dryer, dishwasher and microwave for their new house. And their FICO score has been affected. They no longer qualify. So you're scrambling. So luckily your buyer has a very successful mother who says, you know what, I'll help co-sign. So actually you're bringing in the mother into the transaction because you need her credit score, you need the depth and the season, you need her. Buyer, the child buyer is good, first time buyer is good, the mother's good, lender's good, it all works out. But I have to actually, depending on where I am in my transaction, I got to let the other side know. Right? So assignment requests. So how this is written, unless I change it, I have 17 days to bring the mother on without having I can just bring the mother on. I have to get the seller and the seller's agent to sign, but I don't need kind of their approval. I have 17 days to do this. I don't know about you, but I've always seen this happen, not within the 17 days. It always seems to happen on the 25th day after contingencies are lifted, right? So I have a first-time buyer who has 15 grand in EMD, and now they don't qualify, and they think they're closing. They've already called Beacons to move out of their apartment, and they don't qualify for the loan, so we've got to bring mommy or aunt in. But be very aware. In the event this happens before the 17th day, I'm good. I need to bring mom in. I just add an AO. I just added one of our CAR forms, additional, either an additional agent or additional principal. And, but here's the thing. If it happens, like it's always happened in my world, on the 25th day, that's when I need to now negotiate this with the seller. The likelihood is that on the 25th day, everyone's getting ready to close, and they're not going to have a problem with, most likely, the mom jumping in to save the transaction. However, in the previous market, I don't know, 5 months ago, if we're in escrow with this particular buyer and offers keep coming in and keep coming in over and over and over the price I'm actually in escrow for, you can imagine why the seller would say, kick this buyer to the curb, because I can go with another buyer and they're going to pay me $25,000 more. It's a little different in this market today, but be very aware of this assignment. 17 days, no problem. But after 17 days, because that's the contingency period to add the mom to save the transaction, you're going to have a conversation with them in order to add them. Okay, loan contingencies, again, remember, our years and years ago, all the contingencies were written in the contract for 17 days. But a handful of years ago, we kept the 17 days on the RPA and modified loan contingency to be 21 days. Well, with this new RPA, everything is defaulted to 17 days unless you modify. So here we go. Loan contingency, 17 days. If you check no loan contingency, you can do that. And as soon as I check this, see, look, as soon as I check this, it takes my options to change that out. Appraisal contingency, of course, I can modify that. No appraisal contingency. It clears my ability to edit that. Investigation, which is, my investigation, 17 days. Informational access to the property, 17 days. Buyer's rights, okay. What else did I want to add here? All right, time of possession. Let's go down to time of possession. So I grew up in real estate, and I grew up in real estate when there was no SIP, seller in to stay in possession. I grew up where, and you probably have had these conversations with agents that you negotiate with, is that we're going to close in 30 days and the seller gets to stay for 3 days. And you say, okay, fantastic, we can work with that, but we need to complete an SIP. What's an SIP? Even though it's been around for a while now, some of your very seasoned agents, they didn't do that. So now we've gotten used to, hey, any time that seller is staying in possession, if it's a day, if it's 3 days, if it's 29 days, we need to complete the paperwork, because we need to protect, we need to protect everybody. So we're kind of not used to the SIP. Well, here's something else we have to get used to, because in the old contract, it said, we're going to open up escrow and we're going to close in 30 days. And then it talked about time of possession. It said time of possession would be delivered. It was at 5 o'clock to the buyer, and then it was amended to 6 o'clock. So possession to be delivered to the buyer at 6 o'clock of COE, unless of course we modify that. Well, check this out. Look at how they changed this. Now they're saying, oh, no. Time of possession is actually upon recordation. So as soon as we are notified that there's a recording at the county, that's when the buyer has possession of the property. So be very aware of this. We're probably, you know what, and I don't know about you guys, but unless it's a vacant property, if it's a vacant property, that's going to work great, especially if we're recording early. It'd be great if we can record early, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, because of course the U-Haul's already on the way. But you know, if there is a seller still living there, make sure that you complete this properly, because you will get phone calls. Where am I parking my U-Haul? Because they haven't left yet. All right, seller occupied. So then here, right here on M2, it says seller occupied, COE date if checked below. So again, it's telling me, it just guides me. This new RPA is beautiful. If the seller wants to stay in the property, how many days? I'm going to say 7. As soon as I check that, an SIP was automatically generated. That will help all those folks that were in transactions with it, that don't know what an SIP is. And then I can put 7 here. Now, as you know, this is a little reminder. Uncheck this. If it's more, oh my gosh, what did I just do? If it's more than 29 days, let's say 30 days or more, I click here. And now an SIP is not automatically added to my transaction. The residential leased after sale, the RLAS, is added to my transaction. It's a different version of the SIP because it's for 30 days or more. There you go. Also, check with your lender. A little side note here. Before you have a fully executed RPA, check with your lender, because some lenders, especially if you check the 30 days or more and you wrote 90, check with your lender that when this RPA gets to the underwriter, that underwriter is not going to have a problem with 90. They may not. I'm not a lender, but from my little experience in real estate, 90's a long time, and there's wording in the loans that say, hey, listen, I got this rate because I'm an owner occupied and I'm moving in. Lenders and the banks understand that there's going to be a transition for that current owner to move out, and we move in, you know, the 3 days, the 5 days, even 30, maybe 45. But when you start writing on an RPA that you're allowing them to stay an extended amount of time, you might run into some issues. So be real careful because you know, you're negotiating it, you're making everything good, you're handling it well with your clients, with the seller's agent, the listing agent, the sellers, you're working hard, you're texting, and then you've come up with this 90 days, which works for everybody. And you're like, oh my God, I got a deal, I got it. And then you forgot to check with your lender, and that's going to be a problem. So there's ways to work that. Just double check on that. That's an objection that you're going to have to handle down the road. So if you get in front of it, it's not going to be a problem. Okay, again, seller has to deliver documents within 7 days. I love this. So in the old contract, it said it, but it was so hidden that people didn't even know it was in there. Did you know? Well, now you do. Look at N2. Sign and return escrow holder provisions and instructions right there. So not only as a seller do I have to make sure I give all the documents to the buyer within 7 days unless modified, it's also stating right there that as soon as I get my escrow instructions, I have to complete them and return them to escrow within 5 days. That's quick, especially for the seller when, you know, there may be a notary involved. Maybe we do the notary later, but it says initial information that we need. Many times to really kind of start going with escrow. So heads up on that. It's beautiful. I'm so happy that they wrote that. Look at this. Time to pay HOA fees 3 days after acceptance. This is really holding the seller accountable for their performance. Many times, you know, seller is so excited to talk with you and figure out how much their house is worth, get their house ready, have open houses, get the kids and the dog out, do open houses. Do we have any offers? Oh my gosh, your pictures look great. Oh, I have multiple offers. Oh my gosh, what do we do? And then they get an offer and they're like, woo woo, I've sold my house. I've sold my house, everybody. But the reality of it is they've just they've signed it, they have a fully executed RPA, and they are 30 days away from selling their house. So, and then they stop thinking, okay, I don't have to do anything. Okay, so I'm going to call Beacons, I'm going to get some boxes, I'm going to call cable, and I'm going to call the electricity because I think we might move out early, blah, blah. And you're like, no, slow your roll. And you can't say it that way, but you want to say, yeah, the fat lady has not sung here. Stop. You guys still need to perform, and we have 30 days to close this. So be very careful with hiring the Beacons or start packing or, turning off electricity. Of course, that's a whole other conversation. We don't want them to do that. Okay, delivery documents, sign escrow instructions, time to pay HOA fees. Again, in the olden days, escrow would order HOA fees, and they would float the money. Money would float, and they would take the money actually out of the buyer's deposit. That's not how it is anymore. It's many times, the majority of the times, that is a seller paid service to get the HOAs. So they need to get that order within 3 days. And that's, again, why it's so important to get these escrow instructions back to escrow so that this can be handled. As listing agents, remember, if I am listing this property and I know I'm going to use Robin from Hallmark Escrow, or Coast Cities Escrow, excuse me, I'm going to have a conversation with my seller to get in front of this. They're promising, the sellers have signed this contract and they have promised to perform during this time. So a good tactic might be, hey, let's figure out who your HOA is, their phone number, their address, get in touch with them. And I want to let you know, we're going to order these because no matter when we get the buyer, we need to be on this. So this is a great opportunity for you to have this conversation actually before you get offers, so that the seller can order that ASAP. Okay, anything else important? Probably not on this. Of course, then it was really good. Hey sellers, give me the disclosures. Hey sellers, get those loan docs, get the escrow doc signed. Hey, let's order the HOA. Don't forget to, install your smoke detectors and carbon monoxide. Promise to do these. Just heads up, CVS sells smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. Do you know how I know that? Because I did a poor job in explaining this. And here comes the appraisal on a VA loan. And I'm in the house going, oh, shoot, there's no carbon monoxide. So I'm running out of CVS while they're measuring so that he can take a picture that they actually have the detector. So, yep, learn from me. Okay, evidence of representative authority. Okay, so this is evidence of representative authority. This is your RCSD. So an RCSD was when an entity was selling a house. So if it's a trust, if it's an entity selling the house, we have to show that the entity, that Elizabeth has the right to sign for that entity. So I am promising that after 3 days, I'm going to be able to show that you're buying a house and it's the trust of the revocable trust of the Meyers family, that I, Elizabeth Meyers, can sign, because it's an entity actually selling the house. Okay, again, I don't know if I'm going too fast or too slow for you guys. Please let me know. Really great. Hey, what's included? I'm just going to start checking things just to make sure we are not misunderstanding each other in our communication. I want the stove. I want the refrigerator. Look at that S, refrigerators, plural. So heads up. The 15-year-old refrigerator in the garage, if I check this and I don't specify just the kitchen refrigerator, the seller needs to leave both. Again, I've lived that nightmare. Wine refrigerators, obviously, if they're differentiating the two, this has become a problem. Washer, dryers, dishwasher, microwaves. I love the plural. Video doorbells. Of course, you guys have lots of conversations about the video doorbells and the cameras. Wall-mounted brackets for the TV. All these things, years and years ago, between the fountains and the wall-mounted TVs, that was a nightmare for a little bit, but I'm glad CAR updated it, changed it. Automatic, I haven't touched anything. Automatic or bathroom mirrors unless excluded. So a lot of times we see houses where the builder special mirrors have been up there for 25 years and they've remodeled the bathroom and they have gone over and bought some beautiful mirrors, and they've hung the mirrors, one mirror over this sink, one mirror over that sink. And the seller says, oh my gosh, I love those mirrors. I bought them specially. And I want to take them with because that's a personal item. It's not a fixture. I hung it. Well, it is an automatic check here, bathroom mirrors, because there's nothing worse when your first time buyers walk into the bathroom to use the bathroom that they now own, and they walk in there and there's no mirror. And they become very alarmed that the $99 mirror is missing off the wall. Unless you can, of course, always modify this, but it is an automatic check there. Okay, allocation of costs. Let's see, I don't think there's really anything new here. Although, what am I looking for? No. Kind of going through my paperwork here. So let's go over here on Q5, Q6, and Q7. So Q5 says government required point of sale inspections and reports. You know, we, of course, as we all know, we're a member of Leading RE. So we're not only global, you know, national, but we're global. We're local and global. You guys have seen that. A lot of us do sales here in Orange County. So the point of sale is not the city inspections. We don't see that very much here in Orange County, if ever. But, you know, because we are local and global, we sell all over. I don't know about you, but my real estate license says California real estate license, which means I can sell from Eureka to Chula Vista. Yeah. So those other communities and cities and counties are going to have different rules. And so, you know, if you're selling in the city of Los Angeles, in the county of Los Angeles, as you know, there's going to be different rules there. So there will be some point of sale. So here on Q5, Q6 is, you're going to see that. If you're just doing Orange County stuff, this is not going to be an issue for you. Okay. Let's see, let's now go. I'm almost done with my grid. I'm done with my grid at this point. And now I get to go to more of the definitions. I have one more page, some more checks. But other than that, I'm done with my grid. So when they redid this RPA, now that I'm on page 4, they said, hey, let's create one RPA, regardless if it's a manufactured home or if there's tenants in there or if it's a probate. Let's just figure out one way to get all that information on one form, hence the 16 pages. And then if it is a manufactured property, manufactured home, or if it is a probate or tenant occupied, let's then just be able to have the agent complete that on that one and only RPA. And then the addendum to be added as an auto-populate. So that's the beginning of page 4. So in the event I'm buying a property or I'm completing an RPA here for a probate, I click here. The now the PA is now added to this contract. If it's a manufactured home, guess what? I get to use this RPA, but then the manufactured home addendum gets added. Tenant occupied, tenancy in common, stock cooperative, like, have you ever done that? Or other. So everything is here. So oh my gosh, it's pouring out. It's like pouring like cats and dogs. Happy summer. All right, other agendas. Again, if I'm going to accept your offer as a backup, or I'm writing this offer as a backup, I can check right here. That auto-populates the BUO, backup offer. All right. Going down, buyer and seller advisories. I haven't checked those, so those are automatic. Well, because this is what comes up when I write an offer. When I open up a new RPA, these are my forms that get auto added to it. And now I get to my definitions. Look, I'm on part 5 of the transaction. I'm in definitions, additional information about deposits, all cash offers, loans, balance of purchase payment. So let me see if there's something juicy here. I think there's something juicy on page 5. Am I on page 5? Okay, page 5. So let's go up here. Closing and possession. All right. What did I want to say? Okay. Kind of already talked about that. It's very clear here that seller remaining in possession after close of escrow. It really talks about making sure that you have your paperwork, because in the event that there is an issue with the property, we need to make sure that that SIP or the RLAS is completed, because it talks about who's going to be responsible for those issues. If you want to know, if you get an offer or if you get a counter, you write an offer and you get a counter and it says, this property is being sold as is. You guys sent us such a lowball offer. I want to put you on notice that this house, this property is being sold as is. Okay. Thank you for that information. You're redundant. It's actually here. Number 7, as is, and in its present physical condition. So instead of blaming the agent, going, hello, a lot of times as an agent, as a listing agent, we add that actually just to handle an objection with our seller. But it's already in the contract. You don't have to write it, but you're going to see that, because I think sometimes when sellers feel beat up, especially sellers, I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, oh my goodness, I sat down with the seller last November, December initially. They were kind of a B bucket seller. They weren't selling right now. So I talked to them November, December, showed them what their house was worth. Then I visited with them again in February, March. And then we actually signed the contract in April, the listing contract. But they had a lot of work to do. So when we sat down to really figure out the price, it's now June. It's only 6-7 months later, but we're in such a different market that the conversation they had back in December, see, if I'm talking to you in December, I'm looking at comps from 2021, June to December, right? Those were beautiful comps. That was woo-hoo-hoo, hot market. Let's go, let's go. Oh my gosh, how much money am I going to get for my house? Who knows, right? And then you're doing a great job talking to them and talking to them. And we finally are about to go live and really need to zero in on a specific price. My comps now are from January to recent. And in the last, 90 days, we've had such an ever-changing financial world with rates that, you're really going to have to talk those sellers down. And you really have to explain to them that, hey, what you want and what you remember is not the world you're living in now. We're not living in that world now, Mr. Seller. And, as you know, sellers are the last ones to really appreciate, number one, how much their house is worth. They always think it's worth more. And actually what's reflective of the market. Now, here's the irony of your sellers is that, I'm looking out the window right now and gas is $6.58 a gallon. Your sellers know that. Your sellers know that when they went to Ralph's, I was telling my agents this the other day, the toilet paper at my local Ralph's was $15.99. They know that because they live that. But they want to pretend and ignore that when it comes to how much their house is worth. And that, rates aren't going to affect the listing price of my house or the sale price of my house. So they want to put blinders on, even though they know right now our world is a little tight. So you're going to have these conversations. So when you see as is, this is a long way around this. When you see as is, a lot of times it's because the seller is a little disappointed in actually the negotiated price, and they want to let you know they're not going to do any repairs, which is a different conversation. Okay. Contingencies and removals. Okay, I think we talked about okay, really, really important. Under 8.2. Let's read this. Okay, let's read contingency and removals, because how we live and what it really says in the contract sometimes may be two different things. This agreement is, unless otherwise specified or attached here, contingent upon the buyer obtaining a loan specified. You like that? Contingent upon obtaining the loan specified. If contingent, buyer shall act diligently and in good faith to obtain the designated loan. If there is no appraisal contingency or the appraisal contingency has been waived or removed, then failure of the property to appraise at the purchase price does not entitle the buyer to exercise the cancellation right pursuant to the loan contingency. If the buyer is otherwise qualified for a specified loan and a buyer is able to satisfy the lender's non-appraisal contingencies for the loan. So what that's saying, and that we're not really seeing that right now, but I don't know, and I don't know in your world, but you know, we talk about this in my office. Hey guys, anybody having a problem with appraisals? And it's quiet. No. And they're kind of looking around. No. Okay, so no problem with appraisals. No. And then last week in the meeting, two different agents said one agent said I had two appraisals come in above purchase price, which is odd. So in the event that we start seeing a discrepancy in appraisals versus what we're in escrow for, a purchase price, remember, if that appraisal contingency is waived, you cannot use the appraisal contingency as a reason. It's no longer a safety net. You have removed that safety net. It's kind of a bit same. But I really like number 2 here. So heads up, because our world has changed in regards to fire hardening and insurability. All right, so look at number 2. Buyer is advised to investigate the insurability of the property as early as possible, as this may be a requirement for the lender. For lending, buyer's ability to obtain insurance for the property, including fire insurance, is part of the buyer's investigation. Failure of the buyer to obtain insurance may justify cancellation based on the investigation, but not the loan contingency. All right, so what that's saying is, if you do not modify your contingency periods in your RPA and you leave everything at 17 days, and on the 15th day, you, as a very good agent, because you work for our company, First Team, you tell your buyer, hey, you know, as part of your investigations, you still have a couple days, start calling around and make sure, and start calling around and setting up that fire insurance, because we're going to close in 2 weeks. And they call and they get fire insurance, no problem. Then come a 17th day, you can lift everything. You can lift all your contingencies. You're good. Here's the problem. If you ask for a 21-day loan contingency, but a 17-day investigation contingency, and come the 17th day contingency timeframe, you receive a contingency removal, you remove your investigation contingencies. And then a couple days later, you're working, it's the 21st day, you're calling the lender, hey, I'm getting pressure. I promised to lift the loan contingency in 21 days. Where are we? The lender says, well, we're good to go, but I need your buyer to make sure, I need your buyer to give me some insurance information. You've heard this before. So you call your buyer, hi, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. Hey, where are we? The lender is wanting to give me a thumbs up on your loan, but he won't give me the thumbs up on your loan until you guys get that insurance information to him. And your buyer's like, oh my God, I'm so stressed out. I've like called AAA, I've called State Farm, I've called Farmers, and I can't get insurance on this house. Like I can't, they don't want to give me fire insurance on this house. And the lender is telling me I have to get fire insurance or they're not going to give me the loan. And so let's say at one point they can't get fire insurance on this house. And the lender says, hey, either you figure it out or I'm not going to get you the loan. And the buyer goes, forget it. I'm moving on. We're moving on. We're canceling. Well, that fire insurance is part of the investigation contingency. It's not part of the loan contingency. So if we've lifted the inspection contingency, I can't use that reason to cancel. That reason does not fall under my loan contingency safety net. So this number 2 here is really big when it comes to our behaviors. All right. So the fire insurance is tied to your investigation contingency, not your loan contingency. I could have just said that all the entire time. Okay. I love this part. Look at this B. This agreement, where is it on here? Okay. So important. This agreement is, unless otherwise specified, contingent upon written appraisal, blah, 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 blah. Appraisals are often a reliable source of footage, repainting, blah, blah, blah. However, the ability to cancel, this is the important part, the ability to cancel based on the measurements provided in the investigation. Okay, here it is. The appraisal contingency is solely limited to the value determined by the appraisal. For any cancellation based on the appraisal contingency, buyer shall deliver a copy of the written appraisal to the seller upon request by the seller. So again, I'm going to cancel. Sorry, Greg, I'm calling you up. Hey, man, the house didn't appraise. And it's like, really? It didn't appraise? I said, no, we're going to cancel. He goes, oh, that's a bummer. Hey, do me a favor. When you send over the, the cancellation paperwork, Elizabeth, send over a copy of the appraisal. No, Greg, I'm not doing that. That appraisal is property of the buyer. They paid for that, Greg. And Greg says, yes, you're right. It is. It is. But let me just double check if we have a fully executed contract. Oh, yes. There it is. Hey, you might want to check on the RPA that's been fully executed by both the seller and your buyer, that they promised here on paragraph 8B2, that in the event you are using that appraisal contingency to cancel because the house didn't appraise, that you actually have to send us a copy of the appraisal. And that then the buyer's agent goes, all right. So there you go. Okay, let's see. Cognizant of the time. All right, page 6. Buyer review of lien contingency item. Why did I highlight this? Okay. Let's see. I want to go through. Oh, you guys know this, right? So on 11, it says right here, and I'm not going to get into it but when when I'm the listing agent and I want to get all the disclosures over to the buyer agent, even though I've promised to do it in 5-7 days, whatever the RPA says, a lot of times I really want to get it there by the time they have their home inspection, right? Because it's really great, because I've been on the buy side where I have the buyer and I have the home inspection and I have this stack of disclosures so that my folks can look, so the buyers can look at the disclosures as the inspector's going in the house. And when the inspector says, hey, it looks like, this drywall here has been replaced, you can go back to the TDS and SPQ and figure out, oh yes, they blah, 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 and they disclosed it. So it's really nice to have that. And it is, so you're able to get all the disclosures, right? The SPQ, the TDS. So again, the AVID is our responsibility. The AVID stands for Agent Visual Inspection Disclosure. And, it's super, super easy to do your AVID during the time of the inspection. It's really super easy to go, oh my God, I totally didn't do I hate doing my AVID. I got to do my AVID. And you get the AVID late. So remember, any disclosure that your client gets, they get 5 days to review that. Even if it's your own AVID, even if you're on the buy side and you complete your AVID, you didn't get it to your clients, whatever you get, they have 5 days to extend that investigation period because you were late on that delivery. You need to send over your TDS and your AVID at the same time. They're actually interlinked. So send it over at the same time. I know, it's the one thing we don't like to do because we're always concerned on how we complete the AVID. And rightly so, because, initially years ago, when the AVID came out, it says Agent Visual Inspection. So the thinking of maybe not sophisticated agents was, I just have to write down everything I see. And I have to tell you, don't tell anybody this, but I would like to write things like wall-to-wall carpet, ceiling fan, because I wanted to be neutral, because years ago, it was to prove that I was actually in the property. Boy, has that changed. Now the AVID is because it's not just only Agent Visual Inspection, there's a section, any other things to discuss, any other disclosures, anything, any other comments or something, I forget what it says. So I've got to, even if I know something that it's not visual, it's cerebral, I've got to write it down. I mean, the AVID could be a problem for us. So it's really easy for us not to want to do it. I have to tell you, and you guys know that our counsel, Gila, has created an addendum, an AVID addendum, and it is so beautiful and it's so powerful and it just is so protective of us that, of course, it's mandatory to add it to our AVID, but it's just beautiful. So long story short, I'm not making a long story short, I'm keeping a long story long, get your AVID and your PD at the same time. All right. I'm kind of, let's see, copy of reports. Oh, so remember I told you about the buyer, how the buyer wants to cancel because of the appraisal? And I'm like, sorry, Greg, I'm not going to send it over to you because that's property of the buyer. And Greg's going to say, yeah, go read your RPA, Elizabeth, you're dumb. Yeah, so same thing. Look at page 9. Copy of reports, same thing. So when as a buyer, I get reports, and I do, I'm going to get probably at least one inspection report, right? I need to send that over to the seller. So this is where it gets tricky. And I've had this conversation with agents because they think they're trying to be helpful. We have an inspection on the property. Inspection's not very good. And so I called Greg up. I'm like, hey, Greg, listen, you know, you and I have known each other for 15 years. This property is just not going to work for my client. So we're going to cancel, you know, just based on the inspection. And Greg's like, really? I'm like, yeah, you know, like the windows are bad. The roof is bad. You know, I know the elderly person, you know, there's a lot of deferred maintenance. They didn't take care of this house, and it's just too much for my particular buyers. And Greg goes, okay, no problem. I get it. Just send me over the cancellation. I said, okay, but you know what, Greg, listen, because I like you and you're a good guy, I am not going to send you over that inspection report because it actually is going to be a problem for you with the next buyer. You know, once I send it to you, then you're put on notice and you're going to have to disclose it. So I'm going to help you out. You're a good guy. Oh my gosh, thanks so much, Elizabeth. Okay, if that happens, wrong. I get that Elizabeth likes Greg. I don't want to have a problem for him, but per the contract, if I get any kind of report, I need to share it with the seller. If it's beautiful, if it's ugly, if it's bright, light, and airy, or if it's dark, dingy, and bad, I've got to give it to Greg. And then, of course, we know that when Greg gets into escrow with Tina, he's going to have to get all the disclosures or all the reports I've given him, and he's going to forward it on to Tina. And that is just cover your back. That is full disclosure. So if you want to know where that is, hello, it's right here in the RPA. So even though I like Greg and I want to help him out, I'm a walking lawsuit. Okay, time periods. Anything else? I want to kind of go through it. Just, of course, page 11. Am I on 11 yet? Page 11. Notice 2 buyers and timeframes. Just heads up. Okay. I'm the buyer's agent. Greg's the seller's agent. And Greg can't get a hold of me. I have not called him back. He hasn't heard from me. And time's, of course, ticking. Time's ticking, and I'm not performing. So per the contract, Greg has the right to send a notice to perform. I'm not performing, and he's going to send me a notice. Elizabeth, I'm going to give you a notice to perform. And how the contract is written is that he is going to send it, and he's going to give me 2 days to perform. All right. And then, of course, if I don't perform whatever he's deeming that I need to perform, that I've promised to perform, and I'm not performing, he then can draw, you know, a demand to close, or kind of depending on where I am, demand to close or cancellation. Okay. So heads up. I know we know the trick that when I write an offer and I promise to do something in 17 days, Greg can actually send me a notice to perform on the 15th day. He can actually send it to at least 2 days before that performance is due. We know that, right? So if you have a flaky buyer, or if you're smelling something weird, you might want to be right on it on the 15th day, send them that notice to perform, because come the 17th day, you want that performance to be dialed in. We know, we understand that. So then you think, you know what? Oh my gosh, I'm going to go away this weekend, and I'm not going to be able to really be around to send it on the 15th day. I'm going to just send it early. I'm going to send it on the 14th day, and just kind of give them an extra day, extra heads up, because the 17th day is the 17th day and whatever, right? So I'm just going to send it a day early. Okay, really bad thinking, because right here in the contract, it says you can't send it earlier than 2 days. Meaning physically, can you? I think you can. what it means is go ahead, send it, go on vacation, Elizabeth, in the middle of a transaction, Flake. But if you send it early, it's null and void. So if you want to keep somebody on their toes, you better be on your toes when it comes to when you're sending that paperwork. Okay. Again, demand to close. So, oh, is there a question? When you have a problem with a buyer or a seller performing, there is there's a process. Notice to perform, demand to close, and there are timeframes with that. So many times the seller is on, I don't know, the losing end of this because he's like, what's going on? The buyer's not lifting their contingencies. What's going on? So as an advocate to your seller, you are sending notice to performs. And of course that gives them 2 days. And then if they don't perform, then you can draw up cancellations, or then you can draw up a demand to close. But remember, right here, it says that they get 3 days. So hypothetically, in a perfect world of unicorns and puppy dogs, if a buyer isn't performing, you can send them notice to perform, which is 2 days, and a cancellation, which is 3 days. So they really get 5 days to stop ghosting you or respond. Of course, that's a very blanketed statement that I just made, but you just can't cancel. And of course, I've never met a seller that as soon as the buyer maybe isn't responding or needs an extension, I've never met a seller that says, let's cancel and I'm keeping their money. I'm keeping their money. They canceled after 5 days. I'm keeping their money. Right? And then you're up for the task of explaining to them again that the EMD it's not layaway. You don't get to keep the money. And that layaway comment is for anybody over 55. Okay, so the young people don't even know what layaway is. Okay, so one more question or a couple more comments. The MLS and photos. Okay, so you'll love this. You represented the seller. You took beautiful photos. You sold the house. Buyer moves in. Buyer calls their agent and says, I want the pictures of my new house taken off the MLS. And so you get this phone call from the buyer's agent saying, hey, can you go on to your listing and take the MLS photos down? And you're like, no, your buyer's weird. Okay, so 21, multiple listing service. Agents are authorized to report MLS. Of course, this is saying that you have to, once you're an escrow, you have to change your status. But in here, it talks about, here we go. Where is it? I have it here. MLS. Under buyer. Buyer acknowledges that any pictures, videos, floor plans, images, or other information of the property has been and will be input into the MLS and internet portals, or at the instruction of the seller in compliance with the MLS rules, will not be removed after close of escrow. So I can kind of appreciate that they don't want their stuff, their stuff up there, but it's 2022, man. I can Google your name and I can figure out where you live and what your cell phone number is and your email addresses and where your mom and dad live. So I can get that people don't want their picture after they bought a house on the internet, but not only is it on the MLS, it's also been syndicated to all the portals. So right there in the fully executed RPA, it says, hey, heads up buyer, don't be a weirdo after you move in and want those photos taken down, because you've actually just been notified that they're not going to be taken down. Right. So it's 10 after 10, I think. Yes. Yes. Okay. So good. Oh, one more thing. So you'll have to laugh at this. On page 15. On page 15. Yes. Okay. So a couple years ago, we start, a handful of years ago, when we would try to sell a house that was a probate or a trust, you were writing the entire trust name on the listing agreement or the RPA, and you're signing it, and there wasn't enough room. And then CAR came up with the RCSD. Remember the RCSD? And it was great because it basically said, hey, the trust is the Meyer family trust, and Elizabeth can sign for it. And so I'm showing that Elizabeth is connected to the trust. Here's a copy of the trust. Here's my proof. Here's the trust. Elizabeth's going to sign for the trust. So when I start getting all these documents, even though it's typed in Meyers Family Trust, Elizabeth Meyers can, Elizabeth, because I connected Elizabeth Meyers to the trust, and here's a copy of the trust that proves that I can sign for it. All right. So finally, we understand how that works, how all that paperwork is connected, and that I can sign Elizabeth Meyers as long as I prove that I'm the right person for I have the authority to do that. So luckily, now that we all know how to do that, it's kaput. We don't really need it because what they've done with these new forms is they've incorporated the RCSD into the forms. So again, this is a 16-page document. I'm getting to the end, I'm getting to arbitration. Page 16 is where I sign. But page 15 is a little version of the RCSD. So in the event that there's an LLC buying the property, or that on this offer, the seller is a trust, I can click here. Note if this paragraph is completed and representative capacity signature disclosure, your RCSD is not required because you're actually taking the RCSD and you're completing it here. Heads up on that. They're actually not going to get rid of the RCSD for other reasons, but in the event you are an LLC buying it or there's an RCSD, click here and you can complete that correctly. All right, so before we go, I'm guessing people asking questions. Does anybody need me?
I wanted to revisit one thing, if that's okay.
Who's that?
Go back, I think I kind of missed the sending the notices to perform early. Did you say you're allowed to send them up to 2 days early, and any earlier than that, they're null and void?
That's correct. So per the contract, and in this example, the contract says that all contingencies were to be lifted on 17th day, right? So you can actually send the notice to perform on the 15th day. You can send it 2 days early.
Okay,
So
and any earlier than that, then it doesn't mean anything.
That's right, it's out, right. I'm going to the river, so I'm going to send it to you on the 14th day. Well, enjoy the river, Elizabeth, because your notice to perform, you've done a really bad job, representing your sellers, because that notice to perform is invalid. So go drink and party on the river. But at this point, you haven't sent a notice to perform at all.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I have a question. You did a great job. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is Rachel from the Yorba Linda office.
Hi, Rachel.
And I wasn't clear as when you were talking about that if the buyer was unable to get buyer insurance, if the loan contingency was removed, but they were not able to get buyer insurance, can they still cancel? I mean, a fire insurance.
Yes, as long as the inspection contingency was still in place. The fire insurance is part of the inspection contingency.
But if that were removed, would that be a problem?
It would be a problem. We'd have to have a conversation about your EMD at that point. So hypothetically, and again, the world of CAR and the contract doesn't necessarily mirror how we behave, right? Meaning the reality of it is you haven't, like I was saying, you have a first-time buyer who goes out and buys appliances and it messes up their FICO score. So we need to bring mom in. That always happens on the 25th day, right? The reality of the fire insurance is a lot of times a buyer won't check that out until the end. They're so excited about the house. They're doing the inspections. They're figuring out how much new carpet's going to cost, right? They're excited. You want them excited. That's the carrot. And they're not thinking of the paperwork part. And so when they get down to the fire insurance, which is the last thing anybody wants to do, it's so boring. It's just a phone call. I just have to make it. But the problem is if you have gone and you've lifted your inspection contingencies, your investigation, and lifted your loan contingency, you've got nothing in place. And so come the 25th day, when the lender's like, hey, a pre-doc condition here, man, we need to know what kind of insurance you have, who are you using? Oh yeah, let me call State Farm. And on the 25th day, you realize that this house is not insurable. We're gonna have a problem because you've lifted your investigation contingency.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
By chance, is this available on replay?
God, I hope not.
I just jumped in a tiny bit late, so I was hoping.
It is. Everything's.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Mhm.
You were great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm not going to listen to it. God, it's probably awful. All right. Anybody else?
I have a quick question. We have a coffee clutch in the morning with Steve Osborne, and we're finding, and I'm going through this myself, that the buyers are not listening, adhering to the contract and removing the contingency removals. I'm going through that myself. And the loan has been approved, and now they're telling me that, we can close earlier, but I still haven't gotten the contingency removal.
Yeah.
My clients, I asked them to do a notice to perform. They don't want to do that because we did get the loan. The lender said everything's okay. But one of my other colleagues on the morning call went through the same thing, that they're not removing the contingency removal. So is that our only option, to do a notice to perform, I suppose?
Well, here's the thing. And, sometimes people work out of ego. Sometimes people work from a place of fear. So if your seller is concerned and they don't want to put a lot of pressure on the buyer because they think they're going to scare away the buyer, and they feel that they have so much riding on this deal closing, sometimes that seller might work from a place of fear. And so when you're having a conversation with your seller saying, hey, it's the 20th day, I've talked to the lender and the lender says they're good to go. I call the agent and the agent says that the buyer just doesn't want to lift the contingency. And I reminded the agent that the buyer has promised to do that, because they promise in the RPA, they promise performance. And the agent says, I know, but I just can't get them to sign. And that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Exactly.
So then you go to your seller and say, okay, seller. So here's the thing, Mrs. Seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is that I understand that you're concerned about spooking the buyer because you want to get to Tennessee, your grandkids are there, the new baby's coming, blah, 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 right? I understand that. But here's the thing. They're kind of holding you hostage because they, until they lift that contingency, can walk away scot-free, and you now have been taken off the market, and your house isn't being marketed actively because it's in a different status on the MLS. People can still see it, but it's not going to come up in the searches as much as the active agents. And as you know, there's more inventory right now, so there's more competition. So we need to figure out what this guy is doing, what this buyer is doing. And so by an option we have is we can put some pressure on him so that he then performs like he's promised. Because here's the thing, he's supposed to close in 10 days. If he doesn't lift his contingency and he doesn't close in 10 days, it's going to take us another 5 days to cancel. So that means your property's been off the market for 35 days. So, here's the thing, by sending him a notice to perform, it's like having a child and the child is messing around with the other kid at dinner, and you're out at Olive Garden and you say, stop it, Zachary, don't do that. He continues, Zachary, don't do that. Leave your brother alone. I don't know if this sounds familiar to any of you. And then, Zachary, if you do that one more time, I am going to take away your phone and your Game Boy at home. I put them on notice. He ignored the first two. I put him on notice. And so when he does it again, I reach over the table and I take his phone and say, you're out of luck. You have no Game Boy, blah, 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 right? In the olden days, you say, I'm going to pull down your pants and spank you, but you can't say that now. So you're putting them on notice. Now, a good parent would make sure that they followed through with that threat, right? By the third time. But it's important to remember that as a listing agent, I can put you on notice, but I don't necessarily have to cancel. But by putting you on notice, and here's the important thing, it's a protection to your seller because it starts the time frames. So that if I put you on notice on the 20th day and you don't perform by the 23rd day, I can at that point cancel, or I can let it ride, and then come the 30th day, I can then start the cancellation because I've already done the notice to perform. If I don't ever start that notice to perform until after the 30 days or whenever he was supposed to close, and at that point, your seller is going to say, oh my gosh, we've waited for this guy and waited for this guy, and he keeps delaying it, and now it's 30 days, and he's delaying it, and we need to know, we need to get, now I got to start my notice to perform, which is 2 days. And then I start my cancellation process, which is 3 days. So I can't even close in 5 days. I can't even cancel in 5 days. So
Okay.
it's just delaying it. So that's what's important to the conversation with the seller is, I hear you, I understand you don't want to spook them, but in the event he continues to not perform, the only way a seller has to cancel is by this process, and it starts with the notice to perform.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very
And
much.
it's also, Rachel and everyone else, you want to make sure you put that in writing to the seller, not just a conversation, because if they're deeper in, say the market's shifting, the next offer, let's say this one falls through, the next offer they accept is 15, 20,000 less or whatnot. You know,
Yeah.
you always want to prep them that, hey, you know, you got your time frames, you got your calendars, they know the continuous removal. Hey, we're approaching, you know, day, 17 days. Here's your options. This is what we know. What would you like to do? You know, based on that, because you want some trail there. Because what will
Gotcha.
happen if there's any loss, then they blame just from the conversation. And
Absolutely.
the second thing to that is when you do an NBP, always, we can always do it as per the agreement. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to, a successful closing, just as per agreement, as formality, that kind of thing. So you soften the blow, type deal, because the contract is the contract, but it's how we handle it. And then the last thing is, if we do give an NBP, a notice prior perform, even a seller notice for the opposite way, and what happens, we allow too much time to go by. It's implied that everything is okay, so we can't just drop the axe. It's said again that we might have to reissue a new one if too much time, but what is too much time, right? And that would be up to the attorney, because all of a sudden, if we give it on day 17, now we're in day 35, and we just said, oh, we're drawing a cancellation because we gave it. It's been implied for how long that everything is okay, right? So you might have to reissue a new one. And that's where our attorneys come in, double check to make sure. But anyway, sorry about the Elizabeth.
Okay.
No, I
Oh,
love that.
Thank you both. Thank you.
That was so smart. And it's so true, in a time when in the conversation logs on our SkySoap file, even though they're kind of like our avids, we roll our eyes going, oh, I hate to do this. It's so important. And, again, all the verbal conversations you have, you follow up with an email. That was a great point. Hey, Greg, great talking with you today. Just, as follow up to our conversation, blah, 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 blah. Because I had a verbal conversation with them. I had a Zoom conversation with them, but it's the email that actually is my communication, is my conversation log. Yes. And I also love, so it's funny you brought that up, Greg. So years ago, and, and Greg can speak to this, the notice to perform was mean and nasty, and it was received as aggressive and uber aggressive, right? And like, what the heck? Why they send me this? Geez, agents took it personally. Like you're personally insulting me by sending me that, suggesting that I don't have control or I'm not handling the transaction correctly. But that's changed. And I love your point that when you are sending the notice to perform, it's different if you have, like what Rachel was saying, a buyer who's just actually being flippant and who's not working in, good faith, and time is of the essence, because that is in the contract. If they're not working that way, and so if your sellers are feeling a little bit abused, that's one thing. But if you're going to be just on it and send it over on the 15th day as a precautionary measure. You want to make sure, and I loved your wording, Greg, is that, you want to not flower it, but just be very professional. Say, as per the agreement, just kind of sending this over. Again, the buyer has promised to lift the contingency, but as a selling agent, I'm going to send you over a CR every time. I'm going to send it over because it behooves me. I'm representing the seller. You've promised to do it, but I'm going to keep your toes to the task. So I love that. Good job, Greg.
Yeah, they also, with that, and this was good. There's a lot of great, points in that. Remember, contract dispute is good faith versus bad faith, right? And you can also hold a seller hostage. You went through 30, 35 days, never removed your contingencies, but you darn knew well that you couldn't qualify. That doesn't mean your deposit's not on the line, too, as well. So there can be more to that just because you didn't remove your contingency, but then that comes to legality from there. From that. Is there any other questions, for that? I know we just got a couple minutes.
Yeah, I had a question, Greg.
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
Hi.
This was great, Elizabeth. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I love reading contracts. I love contracts. And every time I review these with someone like yourself, or when we're having these contract type of meetings, I always pick up something. I did not know that it was the buyer's responsibility to provide all inspections within 3 days to the seller. So, so I'm like, wow, so I would only submit reports that were, basically asking for requests for repairs on. So that was very good there. My question though is, in a transaction right now in escrow, I'm representing the buyers, and we're way ahead of schedule. We got our inspections done within, 3 days or 4 days of the opening of escrow. Sent over requests for repairs the following day, and I'm still waiting for the seller's disclosures. We're now 12 days in. I sent an email out this morning. Is this when and I'm reading through, and again, kind of, this buys my, I think this, correct me if I'm wrong, this still kind of buys my clients time reviewing the property, whatever they need to do, because once the reports are delivered, technically the buyer has 5 days to review all of those reports, disclosures. This is an investor flip, so I don't know what those disclosures are going to look like yet, but at this point, if I get no further response or those reports today, then except the only thing I received is the NHD and preliminary title report, and that was from escrow. So I do a notice of form.
That's such a great question. First of all, thank you for bringing that up, because all my examples were when the buyer was being here, when the buyer was not performing as promised. Again, I pointed out multiple times in RPA that there are seller performance timelines. And so, the seller is supposed to get you that stuff, and he didn't. So as soon as he didn't, you could have sent over a seller to perform. He has to abide by the contract too. So yes, you can send a seller to perform. You could have sent it as soon as he didn't get you that, depending on what your contract said. So yeah, you can send a seller to perform. So, again, what the contract says in real life. So real life is, it's an investor.
Yes.
They don't really probably know anything. Here's the real life. They don't know anything. They bought it. They flipped it. Here's the real life. They're on to the next one. They're in escrow. They've already counted their pennies with you. They know they're walking with such amount. Now they're out trying to procure a new investment. That's what they're doing, because they're considering you done. That does not negate that they still owe you information. So that's kind of the personality you might be dealing with. So yeah, send him a notice to perform, and he has to give you that stuff. Now, you're 100% correct on the other. As soon as he gives it to you, he's such an idiot, because he's just, even though you've promised to lift all your contingencies in 17th day, when he sends all this stuff to you, he's actually extended things by another 5 days, because your buyer has the right to sit and get this information and understand it.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Good
Very
job.
good. This
Good
is great. I love this stuff. We should have this at least once a
good.
month.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good. I didn't know I was going to be able to say anything new today. So good.
Elizabeth, that means you're on once a month. We got you.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks. Thanks, Kevin.
It's a run
You know
testing.
what? We're already, that means we're inking July, August, September,
Thanks.
October, November, December,
Thanks,
right?
Lily. Yeah. Yeah, and
Um,
remember, I was not going to send you over those reports because you were my friend.
And I know it's about, time, but I'm gonna to leave with a trick question and so forth and see what everyone, feels in there. Can a buyer today, right, get accepted on the loan terms that they have, and that seller has accepted and close on a different loan? Yes or no?
Yes.
As long
Yes.
as they don't.
Yes.
Okay, and some people say,
Yes.
some people yes, and everyone's saying, whoa, revised contract, right? And this is just a question. Yeah, if a buyer, though, what it says in the contract, that the buyer must pursue the loan that has been agreed upon unless otherwise agreed, right? That if it was made changes to it. However, they can have other terms that they actually say they apply to, and if they're at closing, ready to go, they can close on the other loan as long as they pursued their initial loan, right, on that. And they just say they can close on this one or close on this one. They can, because it has not hindered escrow.
And
You
that's
got that?
really good. So, and sometimes that happens where I've changed the loan terms. I can change the loan terms with this new contract as long as there's no delay in performance by me. That's the other caveat there. So if I wrote it for 10%, went down to 5%, I can change that. But if I'm still able to perform and close on the same day and not affect the seller, I'm good to go.
Yeah. So the seller, you're right. So Sophia, if we change the terms and we just go to VA and we are a conventional and we try to pursue that, but we stop pursuing the other one and we fail to close, we got a problem, right, on there. So what happens is if we're going to change terms, go from 10% down to 5% down, we're going to change the anything to do with the loan and not pursue the original agreement, we have to get the seller's okay. But however, if we pursue that one, but we have another option that we pursue at the same time, we can close on the initial one, but we also decided that, hey, this one might be favorable and we can close on that, we can close. As long as we're pursuing what we need to do as per the agreement, unless otherwise agreed by the seller.
You're
Right?
so smart, Greg. And and I can see, because I know what a good agent and what a good manager you are, is that where the misguided agents are going to hear, they're going to hear, oh, well, I can write an offer so that I look better and prettier and more attractive and get picked, and then I can change it over here. It's really clear that's not what Greg is saying. You cannot do that. and be very clear that if you receive an offer and accept an offer where they're trying to be all razzle dazzle, and you go with that offer and they misunderstand changing of the terms and then do this, a bait switch thing, yeah, cancellation is going to be a good conversation to have with them.
Oh yeah. Oh,
That
yeah.
EMD, and of course, and you guys know that, oh, we get to keep the money. We get to keep the money. I don't ever want to hear anyone saying we get to keep the money, because that is such a long and drawn out process. But it's really important, and we have to guide our sellers, because they all think they can keep the money. No, that's not how it works. But
Yeah.
we're going to give them one hell of a fight if they try to pull that garbage on us.
Absolutely. Well, anyways, Elizabeth, you've been fantastic,
Oh.
too, as well. Since Kevin said you're coming back, that means you're
Yeah,
coming
once a
back,
month,
right?
apparently.
Okay. But anyways, we appreciate everyone being part of First Team Real Estate. But before letting everyone go, and again, saying thanks to Elizabeth, next Wednesday, we do have a new approach to farming. That is going to be Terry Cargis and also Dan Sarnacki. They're going to be leveraging today's technology to secure more listings in your farm. So that's going to be a new approach. That is next Wednesday. Elizabeth, thank you as always. We really appreciate
Love you guys.
you, and everyone have a great day.
Love you
All right.
guys. Bye.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.